Good morning and welcome to Let's Talk. I'm Tracy Morgan. Always nice to have you with us. Just after 11 o'clock, our time to sit and chat for a little bit. And of course, today is our day with Lisa Gard with Specialized Staffing. And today we're going to be talking about targeting your job search versus blindly sending out resumes. So we're going to do that here in just a second. But as always, a couple of reminders for you. If you are going to be mobile today and you need to make sure you have that mobile app, it's free and easy to do. Just get into your Android or iPhone device and then turn around and just plug in WISR 680, and it should bring up the app, download it, and you're set and ready to go. Of course, we're streaming online at WISR680.com, and that is the same place that you can go if you want to hear this as a podcast, because this will be our podcast of the day as well. So just look up in the program area. That'll give you the drop-down menu for Let's Talk, and then go from there and look for Specialized Staffing. All right, Lisa Gard, owner of Specialized Staffing, with us today. Hi, Lisa. How are you?
Hi, Tracy. I'm great. How are you?
Oh, it's always good to talk to you. Thank you for spending some time with us today. And we're talking about the job search and, of course, targeting that job search versus blindly sending out resumes. And I could just ask you that right there. I mean, why is it important? Why is that such a big thing to target the job search?
Well, I think oftentimes, Tracy, we hear from candidates, especially those candidates we work with at Specialized Staffing and industry recruiters. We hear from candidates that one of their biggest frustrations is that they send resumes and they never hear anything back. And I think to myself, oftentimes if we're not working and we're sending our resume to just anything without really making sure that our qualifications match what the potential employer is looking for, we kind of call that throwing spaghetti at the wall. You know how when your grandmother made spaghetti, she may have thrown a noodle at the wall to see what sticks, or to see if it sticks, to see if it's done. And so, there are people out there, and we've all done it. I've done it. If you're not working and you really need to find a job, you think, okay, you know what? I know I'm really not qualified, but I'm just going to send it. I'm going to send it to everything I can and just see, what sticks. So, if you want a better chance of getting a response, make sure you're sending your resume to something you're qualified for.
But even then, I know a lot of times people will still send their information and they know they're qualified, and they still don't get a response. That can be frustrating, just something that I've heard and seen from other people. But I know we're talking about targeting the job search and, of course, blindly sending out resumes or not blindly sending out resumes. So go ahead and continue, Lisa.
Yeah, so we're talking about blindly sending out resumes and how it is better to target your job search. So, I think it's sometimes it can be hard to figure out what your target is. And I know, it's important to have a plan and to have a target when you're conducting a job search. So you need to first ask yourself, what direction do you want your career to take? What are the types of things you're interested in doing? And then consider your work-related assets. What education do you have that's appropriate to your target? What natural skills and abilities do you have to bring to the table? What are your likes and your preferences? And then also, what is the market for the type of job you've decided to target? Is there a need for this particular type of skill? Is it something that is logical to pursue? And, there's a great resource. It's called ONET Online, and it's www.onetonline.org. And this is an occupational information network site, and it's really cool. You can go on there and you can play around and enter things like your education, your experience, your preferences, and you can actually, it will narrow down to some targets for you, which, is really helpful. And I know I can get lost in there because it comes up with things that you may never think of. But the whole idea of this is to filter all those things you're you're looking for through kind of a filter, and then you come out with some feasible targets. And I think it's important to know then that you want your resume to highlight those things that are relevant to what you're targeting. So, if you have a lot of experience that is irrelevant to the target and your resume highlights that irrelevant experience, you're less likely to hear back than you would be if you were highlighting that appropriate information.
So if you're targeting a specific job and you want to turn in a resume, you want to fill out the application, should you use the buzzwords that they've used on the job description? Does that help you out whenever you're trying to target, or are they not going to look at those buzzwords?
Absolutely. Well, the more words that are on your resume that match their job description, the better off you will be. And I think it's important, too, that once you've established your target, that you make sure that you have a plan. So, there are things you can do to enhance your own professional image related to that target. So you need to make sure you're branding yourself on LinkedIn. If you have a LinkedIn profile that is all about your experience in one field, but you're targeting another field, and you've done all that work and you've created a resume taking those skills, those natural skills and abilities, and pulling that information out of your experience and highlighting on your resume, you want to make sure your social media presence, at least your professional social media presence, matches that. Because oftentimes employers will look, and it's important that they see what you're presenting yourself to be.
And if you don't mind, I ask you a question about that just because of, I can tell you a recent story where somebody looked at one, we'll just say LinkedIn because that's, the professional site, but
Sure.
Somebody looked at LinkedIn and they saw somebody having more language, like a paragraph, if you will, versus somebody else who was on LinkedIn and just had bullet points. What's more acceptable nowadays if you are trying to use those buzzwords and you're trying to match what's on your resume? Should we be using bullet points to make it easy for an employer to just sift through what you have?
That's a really good question, Tracy, and the answer is either is fine. People are different in how they look through information and how they receive that information. So there are some people, like myself, I'm not very detail-oriented, so quite frankly, if you bullet point something for me, I have a much easier time getting to what I'm looking for than if I'm having to read it in a paragraph. But there are people who would rather read the story. So either is, quite frankly, either is appropriate.
So, Lisa, if we're talking about blindly sending out resumes, do you find that a lot more people send out blind resumes, if you will, than what I may realize? I mean, I think maybe a few people do it. Do you see like a ton of people blindly sending out these resumes?
Oh, absolutely. And we speak to our clients, the companies we work with. Oftentimes, one of the reasons they work with a recruiting firm is that we're sifting through all the resumes. It's great to get a huge response to a help wanted ad, but it's not so great when that response is largely not even closely qualified. So there are a lot of people out there who think, well, I'm just going to, go ahead and send my resume. Who knows? Maybe they won't get anybody qualified and they'll call me. That really is not a good strategy for an effective job search.
And I want to ask you, what does it say to a potential employer if we're blindly sending out the resume? But I also have a question that kind of connects with that. What are those indicators to an employee that they automatically pick up? Somebody's just blindly sending this to me. They're just putting the spaghetti on the wall.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the message it sends to the potential employer oftentimes can be that, A, you're not detailed enough, that you didn't read the qualifications, so you weren't detailed enough to understand that you weren't qualified, and therefore you won't be detailed enough for them. The other thing they could think is that you just didn't care. I mean, so I'm not qualified. I'm going to send it to you anyway. And so then, they're going to question, are you going to care here. And lastly, you wasted their time, and therefore, if they bring you in, are you going to waste time there too? So it really doesn't send. I think some people are under the impression that it may show that that I am confident that I can do it. Well, that's great that you're confident, but so it can it can also send those other messages.
And when we're talking about sending out resumes, does this include the cover letter as well? Because they always seem to be a pair. Are there indicators on a cover letter that tells an employer you didn't pay attention to a thing that we put online?
Well, actually, the cover letter could be a great tool, especially if you are applying for a position that your background doesn't necessarily match, but that you do bring the qualifications to the table through other ways. So the cover letter is a great tool. The cover letter is your opportunity to say, look, my background is here, but, I've completed an education, or, I have these natural skills and abilities, and, your cover letter is what the purpose of your cover letter is, to make the person reading it want to look at the resume. So your cover letter is your opportunity to say, okay, don't be so quick to just discount my resume. When you look at my titles, you might see that they don't match what your job description says, but if you look at my skills and abilities, my education, whatever it is that you bring to the table that does qualify you, you'll see that I would be a good fit.
I always find that to be a tricky balance when you're writing that cover letter or resume. Not to write too much, but you want to put specifics in. You want to be detailed, but yet, sometimes you don't have the room. So it's always interesting in trying to find that balance between targeting and then just blindly sending out information. Or do you see a distinct difference between targeting and blindly sending them out?
Yeah, no, and like I said, that's your opportunity to make the employer want to look at your resume. Your cover letter really is introducing you and saying, this is why you should look at the resume.
And the reason I'm going to ask one more question about the resume, or I'm sorry, the cover letter, is because I've called companies before just to ask for a name, not wanting to be in touch with the individual at that moment, just for a name on the cover letter. And what's it look like to an employer if they say no calls, they don't give you a name, and you put like dear hiring manager, opposed to wanting to put a name on that cover letter so the whole package, both cover letter and resume, looks like you targeted them, looks like you paid attention to their company?
Well, it looks like you paid attention if you do what they say. So if it says no phone calls, please, and you send that to the attention of the hiring manager, oftentimes you've probably seen this. It will say, send resume to, and it'll have the company, and it'll say attention Human Resources Department, or attention, it will tell you who to direct it. Maybe not their name, but it will give you the title. And it will go to the correct person. So it does look like you paid attention if you did what they instructed you to do.
So Lisa Gard is with us, Specialized Staffing Industry Recruiters, of course, based here in Butler. And we're talking about targeting the job search versus blindly sending out resumes whenever you're trying to look for a new job. And so, Lisa, what other direction do you want to take us in when we're talking about this particular topic?
Mm-hmm. So much more so about, when I say blindly sending resumes, not necessarily so much targeting the person that you're sending the resume to, but more targeting the type of job that you're looking for, and making sure that what you're sending is portraying what they're looking for, and not just sending your resume to every help wanted ad out there, regardless of whether you're qualified or not. That's what I'm talking about when I'm saying a targeted job search. So, I think it's very important to know that you're qualified for what you're sending your resume to. And, you may not be 100% qualified. And that's fine. If you bring just about everything to the table, but not quite everything, that's fine. But if you don't bring anything to the table, if you read the help wanted ad and you see, or the posting, and you see that you really just you're not qualified, then don't waste your time.
So how can you gain some qualifications if you want to switch jobs altogether, want to switch careers altogether, and you're trying to convince somebody?
And that's a great question.
Yeah.
There are many, many resources, and the one I mentioned previously, the ONET site, which is www.onetonline.org, is an awesome site to go look at and kind of get some ideas of what you may be qualified for. And then, too, there are things to consider. You may need a little more education. You may need to take a course. You may need to get a certification. Maybe you can get some experience by considering doing project and temporary work in certain positions to kind of build your resume where certain skills are concerned. There are many opportunities to do that. Volunteering, when you're volunteering, you can gain different types of experience in different types of organizations and build those skills as well. So there are lots of resources out there to help you build the skills that you may need to move forward in a different career.
And I'm glad you said volunteering, because I think sometimes you get a little nervous about putting your volunteer work down because you don't think it's going to pertain to the job.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If it's appropriate, if the volunteer work does pertain to the job, then absolutely use it. I did a lot of volunteer work at one point in my life, and there were certain things. Maybe I did some work. I'm going to use the Humane Society for an example. I did some work with the Humane Society, and there were two different types of volunteer work I did with the Humane Society. I used to go and walk dogs. And so that volunteer work probably wouldn't be very relevant on my resume if I were looking to move into any sort of, corporate-related function. However, I also was on a planning committee for a fundraising event. And within that volunteer activity, I organized an event. I made cold calls, marketing, and trying to get, donors and sponsors. There was a lot of organizational skill I used there. There was computer skills that I used that, making flyers. And, so you can see the difference in the type of volunteer work. Planning an event, you can look at that and you can break that apart and you can pull out all sorts of things, as opposed to maybe, just walking the dogs was volunteer work that really would, not be very job specific if I were looking for an office job. Now, if I were looking for a job in a veterinary office, that may actually be appropriate. It really is using your common sense and determining if this experience that I'm about to put on my resume, is it indicating that it qualifies me for what I'm applying for?
Lisa, I want to ask you how specialized staffing can help somebody try to target a business or target a resume whenever they're trying to find a new job. But before I get to that question, anything else that you want to include about the issue of targeting a job search versus blindly sending out resumes?
Oh, just that I think if you target your job search, I'm absolutely positive you will see better results. Will there be times where you still don't hear back? Absolutely, because employers are, so frequently just inundated with responses, and they, oftentimes don't get to respond to everybody. But I do believe that if you target your job search as opposed to just sending your resume to everything and anything, you will see a better result. And, specialized staffing and industry recruiters is a professional recruiting firm, and it certainly benefits us if you have your job search targeted. We can help you much more if you know what you're looking for and if you are qualified for what you're looking for. And we can help you to take a look at your resume and determine if you're pulling the most appropriate experience and work-related assets to highlight right up front in your resume. The other thing we can do to help you target your job search is when we are reaching out to a potential employer on your behalf, we are not just sending your resume through a search engine and hoping that it's picking up the keywords. We're actually making a phone call to the hiring manager, discussing your background, telling them what a great candidate you are and helping to get your foot in the door. So that's where the benefit of working with a staffing and recruiting firm can come in.
So when you describe that scenario that you're on the phone with another individual, do you often find out where, I'll just use myself as an example, but where I went wrong in trying to get the job? Like, because when you mentioned just a minute ago that sometimes you won't hear back, as a person trying to get a job, you always wanted to know, where did I go wrong? Where wasn't a match? It's okay, I didn't get the job, but if I had that feedback, it would help me. So you
Absolutely.
as a recruiter, do you find those tidbits out that you can then come to me and say, X, Y, and Z just didn't match up?
Yes. Absolutely. Not just from our standpoint. If you're not the best fit for a position and you're working with a recruiting firm, our clients pay our fee. They pay us to send the most qualified candidates. So if you are not one of the most qualified candidates, try not to be offended if that's the case. Our goal is to find you the most appropriate position in which you will be most successful. So not every job out there is the best fit for every candidate. It's our goal to find the right candidate for the position. So, yes, we will tell you from our standpoint. We will also help you through preparing for the interview and helping you, answer those tricky questions. But once you interview with a client, a good recruiter will give you feedback that they receive from the client. Maybe you had a hard time overcoming a certain barrier with the client in terms of communication, or maybe, and it always isn't bad feedback. Sometimes it's good feedback too. But yes, you do get that feedback when you work with a recruiter. That's one of the benefits of a candidate working with a recruiter. And there is no fee to candidates as well. So you really have nothing to lose in working with a recruiter.
And since we're talking about feedback, I'm going to switch it a little bit from the company giving you feedback on a potential employer to those people that you actually work with. I'm sure you have data. I'm not asking about that, but you could probably see from your data, how many people that you're successful with in trying to get jobs. But how about those individuals who have gotten jobs? Do they ever give you feedback on how easy it is to work with specialized staffing and how easy that process can be?
Oh, yes, absolutely. We seek feedback from both the customer standpoint and the candidate standpoint always. We do surveys periodically throughout the year. We have a Facebook page that you can visit. We ask both clients and candidates to share their experiences with us because we definitely value that. We always learn from those experiences and try to improve constantly.
Lisa Gard, of course, with Specialized Staffing and Industry Recruiters based right here in Butler. Of course, they reach well beyond Butler County. But we're talking about targeting your job search and not necessarily blindly sending out resumes. And I do want to get your contact information, Lisa. We only have a few minutes left. But before we get to that contact information, just your final thoughts on the importance of the whole topic that we've been talking about today, that targeting the job search or targeting the industry that you'd like to be able to get into.
Absolutely. And I just think it's so important to have your job search be targeted as opposed to just, like I said, flinging spaghetti at the wall. It certainly can be effective to do that because eventually something will stick, but I think you will find that you will be much less frustrated at the response if your job search is targeted and if you have the correct format of your resume and you're going about it with a plan as opposed to just trying to throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks.
But that's a good visual. It's something that you remember because you've done it at one time. You've been cooking and you just throw it and you see if it sticks. Yep. It's a great visual.
It's never worked for me. I don't know about you, but actually throwing spaghetti at the wall, it never worked for me.
You just got to taste it. Have a little dinner before you have dinner. That's about
it.
All right, Lisa. So how can we get in contact with you? And the people that you work with are fabulous. So how do we go about that?
Sure. You can reach us by phone at 724-287-8380. You can visit us online at www.specializedstaffinginc.com. And when you do visit us online, there is a resource called myspecializedcareer.com that kind of will take you down another link to resources like resume templates, how to prepare for interviews, how to target your job search, things like that.
Then how does that differ from the ONET? And if folks are just joining us, you had mentioned the ONET.online earlier.
ONET is a government site. It's an occupational information network. It has nothing to do with our site, and it isn't even a link on our site. It's just a site that I like to refer people to when they're not quite sure what they want to do. It's a great site to just kind of put in all those things like your education, your experience, what you like, location, and it kind of filters it for you, and out the other end comes some potential career choices that you can consider.
I see, and then we go back onto your website, and then we can proceed in that direction.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Your website one more time.
www.specializedstaffinginc.com.
Lisa, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much. Again, talking about the job search, targeting that blindly versus sending out just resumes just randomly, or the spaghetti on the wall.
Stop flinging spaghetti.
That's
what
right.
we say.
The lesson for today. Thanks, Lisa. You have a great day.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you. And folks, thanks for joining us for this segment of Let's Talk. Of course, you can hear this online at any time because this is our podcast for the day. So just again, go on WISR680.com and just go to the program area of our website. That'll drop you down to Let's Talk, and then you proceed to specialized staffing. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Tracy Morgan.